For a 600 amp single-phase 120/240 volt overhead electrical service, specific conductor and conduit sizes are necessary to ensure safe and compliant installation. The phase conductors, typically identified as red, black, or blue, should be sized appropriately based on the ampacity requirements and the material used. For aluminum conductors, a size of 600 kc mil-bare aluminum hard-drawn, also known as ARC, is suitable. If using copper conductors, a size of 477 kc mil with THHN or XHHW insulation is recommended. These conductor sizes are based on standard ampacity tables and should be verified against the National Electrical Code, specifically Table 310.15b16 or its equivalent in the local electrical code, adjusting for ambient temperature and the number of conductors in the raceway, if applicable. The conduit selection is also critical for protecting the conductors and providing a safe pathway for the electrical service. It is recommended to use Schedule 80 polyvinyl chloride conduit or rigid aluminum conduit. The minimum conduit size required is 4 inches. This size is determined by the number and size of the conductors being installed, as well as any applicable fill requirements outlined in the National Electrical Code, specifically Chapter 9, Table 1. Before commencing the installation, it is important to verify the specific requirements of the local electrical code, as these may vary from the National Electrical Code. Local amendments or regulations could impose additional requirements or restrictions on conductor types, conduit materials, and installation methods. Factors to consider include the ambient temperature, soil conditions, and the presence of corrosive substances. When installing the conduit, it must be rated for outdoor use to withstand environmental conditions such as sunlight, moisture, and temperature fluctuations. The conduit should be buried at a minimum depth of 36 inches to protect it from physical damage and comply with the requirements of the National Electrical Code Section 300.5. This depth may vary depending on local regulations and specific installation conditions. Ensure that the conduit is properly supported throughout its length to prevent sagging or damage. Support spacing should comply with the manufacturer's recommendations and the National Electrical Code requirements, typically outlined in Table 352.30 for polyvinyl chloride conduit and Table 344.30 for rigid metal conduit. The conductors must be properly terminated in a meter socket or other approved device, ensuring a secure and reliable connection. Use appropriate connectors and termination methods as specified by the manufacturer and the National Electrical Code Section 110.14. The service must be installed by a qualified electrician who is familiar with applicable electrical codes and standards. A qualified electrician will have the necessary knowledge, skills, and experience to perform the installation safely and in compliance with all applicable regulations. Before energizing the service, thoroughly inspect the installation to ensure that all connections are tight, all components are properly installed, and all safety requirements are met. Use appropriate testing equipment to verify the integrity of the grounding system, the insulation resistance of the conductors, and the voltage and current levels at the service entrance. Once the service is energized, monitor its performance to ensure that it is operating within its design parameters. Periodically inspect the installation for signs of wear, damage, or deterioration, and perform necessary maintenance to ensure its continued safe and reliable operation. When selecting conductors, consider the specific application requirements such as the ambient temperature, the number of conductors in the raceway, and the voltage drop. Adjust the conductor size accordingly to ensure that the service can handle the load without overheating or experiencing excessive voltage drop. When selecting conduit, consider the environmental conditions such as exposure to sunlight, moisture, and corrosive substances. Choose a conduit material that is resistant to these conditions to ensure its long-term durability. When installing the conduit, ensure that it is properly sealed to prevent moisture from entering and damaging the conductors. Use appropriate sealing fittings and compounds as specified by the manufacturer and the National Electrical Code Section 300.7. When terminating the conductors, use appropriate connectors and termination methods to ensure a secure and reliable connection. Follow the manufacturer's instructions and the National Electrical Code Section 110.14 to ensure that the connections are properly made. When grounding the service, follow the requirements of the National Electrical Code Article 250 to ensure that the grounding system is properly installed and provides a low impedance path for fault current. Use appropriate grounding electrodes, grounding conductors, and bonding jumpers as specified in the code. When protecting the service against overcurrent, use appropriate fuses or circuit breakers that are properly sized to protect the conductors and equipment. Follow the requirements of the National Electrical Code Article 240 to ensure that the overcurrent protection devices are properly selected and installed. When labeling the service, use appropriate labels and markings to identify the conductors, equipment, and circuits. Follow the requirements of the National Electrical Code Article 110.21 to ensure that the labels and markings are durable and legible. When inspecting the service, use a checklist to ensure that all components and connections are properly installed and meet the requirements of the National Electrical Code. Document the inspection results and keep them on file for future reference. When maintaining the service, perform regular inspections and testing to identify any signs of wear, damage, or deterioration. Repair or replace any damaged components and tighten any loose connections. Keep the service clean and free of debris to prevent overheating and corrosion. The 600 kcmil aluminum or 477 kcmil copper conductors must be rated for the voltage and current requirements of the service. Ensure that the conductors are properly insulated and protected from physical damage. The 4-inch conduit must be large enough to accommodate the conductors and any necessary pulling equipment. Ensure that the conduit is properly supported and protected from physical damage. The meter socket or other approved device must be rated for the voltage and current requirements of the service. Ensure that the meter socket is properly grounded and protected from the elements. The installation must comply with all applicable electrical codes and standards, including the National Electrical Code and any local amendments. A qualified electrician must perform the installation and ensure that it is safe and reliable. The importance of a well-designed and properly installed electrical service cannot be overstated. It is a foundation upon which all electrical systems within a building or facility rely. A substandard or improperly installed service can lead to a multitude of problems, including equipment malfunctions, power outages, fire hazards, and even electrocution. Therefore, it is essential to pay close attention to every detail of the installation process, from the selection of conductors and conduit to the termination of connections and the testing of the system. The information provided here is intended as a general guide and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer before undertaking any electrical work, and ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. By following these guidelines and taking the necessary precautions, you can ensure that your 600 amp single-phase 120/240 volt overhead electrical service is safe, reliable, and compliant with all applicable regulations. This will provide you with years of trouble-free operation and peace of mind. Remember, safety should always be your top priority when working with electricity. If you are not comfortable or confident in your ability to perform the work safely, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the job for you. The cost of hiring a professional is well worth it when you consider the potential consequences of a mistake. Always double-check your work and verify that all connections are tight and secure. Use a torque wrench to tighten connections to the manufacturer-specified torque values. This will help to prevent loose connections, which can cause overheating and arcing. Inspect the installation regularly for any signs of wear, damage, or deterioration. Pay close attention to the conductors, conduit, and connections. If you find any problems, repair them immediately. Keep the area around the service entrance clear of obstructions. This will allow for easy access for maintenance and repairs. The 600 kcmil aluminum or 477 kcmil copper conductor should be inspected for any signs of damage, such as cuts, abrasions, or corrosion. Replace any damaged conductors immediately. The 4-inch conduit should be inspected for any signs of damage, such as cracks, dents, or corrosion. Repair or replace any damaged conduit immediately. The meter socket or other approved device should be inspected for any signs of damage such as cracks, corrosion, or loose connections. Repair or replace any damaged meter socket immediately. The grounding system should be inspected regularly to ensure that it is properly connected and provides a low impedance path for fault current. Test the grounding system with a ground impedance tester to verify its effectiveness. The overcurrent protection devices should be inspected regularly to ensure that they are properly sized and functioning correctly. Test the overcurrent protection devices with a circuit breaker tester to verify their trip settings. The labels and markings should be inspected regularly to ensure that they are legible and durable. Replace any damaged or missing labels immediately. The installation should be inspected regularly to ensure that it complies with all applicable electrical codes and standards. Consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to perform a thorough inspection of the installation. In summary, selecting the right wire and conduit for a 600 amp single-phase 120/240 volt overhead service involves careful consideration of conductor ampacity, material type, conduit size, environmental factors, and code compliance. Always prioritize safety and consult with qualified professionals to ensure a reliable and code-compliant electrical service. Regularly inspect and maintain the installation to ensure its continued safe and efficient operation.